Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I have a Tip Tuesday for you guys. I know it's been a little while. Today is going to be a very specialized Tip Tuesday, but I wanted to have this video up on my channel as just an evergreen video because I'm going to be getting a ton of use out of this new layered die set, and so I wanted to have somewhere to refer you guys to if you needed help assembling these dies if you decide to grab them for yourself. So this set of dies, the Garden Picks 3D die from Altenew, is one that I have had on my wish list. I have been lusting over for months and months and months. It's a little bit on the higher price end for die sets just because it includes so many dies. Just to give you an idea, it's a very intricate and well done die set. And so either it was sold out, which it's constantly sold out. I will try to list some resources down below for you guys. I do believe they have it in stock directly from Altenew. And so I have a link down there, but I've also gotten it from scrapbook.com as well. So it keeps selling out, and then when it would get back in stock, I wouldn't have the funds for it, and it just took a few months before I could grab it, but I am so glad that I did because I've already used it for two projects this week, and so you'll be seeing a ton of it. And so because it's so complicated, I wanted to do this video. Now, the reason I grabbed this in particular was, one, it's gorgeous, but I have a ton of Felicity Jane papers, tons and tons, and in the packs of papers from Felicity Jane, they usually have two solid cardstocks, and they have different colors on front and back. And so I have a ton of these plain color cardstocks that I'm really not using for a ton of things. And so these are perfect for a die set like this. And so the way these work is that you are going to layer basically different colored cardstocks, layer them up, and create a 3D floral image. I mean, these are amazing. Now, it is very intricate and time consuming. I would suggest cutting out a bunch all at once, sitting down, doing it as an evening project, and then, keeping some on hand to use when you go to create rather than trying to create them as you go, because like I said, very tedious. I spent a couple hours the other night putting together a bunch of these. So what I did, let me tell you my first tip. When these come on the backer sheet, they're kind of in a random order. The factory just put them on here the best way that it would fit on this backer sheet. So I went ahead and pulled them all off and realigned them and grouped them into the groups that go together. So like this is a leaf that goes together. This is a leaf. This is a leaf. This is one whole flower. This is a flower. This is a flower. This is a flower. And then this is the little floral bunch. And you can do that with this layering guide that they include. Altenew, if you've ever used any of their products, I'm pretty new to using their products, but from the videos I've seen with their layering stamps and layering dies, they always include these really detailed colored guides to help you along the way. So you'll see, which layers to add together to create that leaf. It even gives you, some color ideas, but of course you do not have to, fit them within that color. So that's my first tip, is to take them all off and line them up. You may either want to line them up with all your first layers and then your second layers and then your third layers if that's easier for you to work. I found it was easier to group specific florals together, and then I could just pull them off and use them as I go. My next tip, I know many of you guys are going to ask what die cutting machine that I use, because you do need a manual die cutting machine to use these dies. I have a Tip Tuesday all about die cutting. I'll link that down below if you have no idea what that is, but I use the Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and I have another die cutting machine, but this is the only one that I use, and this is why, because it folds up and is easy to store. And then this particular one comes with all of the pieces that you need for the cutting sandwich, and also comes with an embossing plate and an embossing mat. So it really, you get the most bang for your buck with this one, and it's easy to store. So this is the one I use to cut everything. And then, like I said, I like the Felicity Jane paper, so I will have those linked down below for you guys. You're going to need a big variety of papers, and there's a couple different options for you. So let me show you one of these florals. So I picked out 4 different pinks, and the idea is that it's a layering, and it actually goes this way. It's a layering die. So you want to go from darkest to lightest. You do want some different shades. Your darkest layer is going to be your bottom layer, following the guide here, and then your next lightest, and then the absolute lightest color that you have, and that's how they're going to stack up, again, along with this little guide there. Now, if you do not have access to a wide variety of shades of pink, don't worry, you have some options. You can use plain white cardstock and paint it with paint, and then, or gelatos, or Neocolor 2 crayons, or watercolors, or inks. You can use ink pads to ink them up and color them. Markers, you could use your brush markers, your Faber-Castell brush markers. Basically, all you're going to want is at least 4 different color shades of the same color. You can also mix in patterns if you wanted to. You could play around with trying different colors, but my experience of playing with it, it's best to kind of follow the guide and stick to, you know, a color family and not get too wild, just because these florals are a little bit on the abstract side. And so if you get a little crazy with your patterns and your colors, it's kind of hard to tell exactly what it is that you're looking at. So I went ahead and picked 4 different pinks. And again, one of the nice things about the Felicity Jane papers is they have a backside, especially the solid ones have a backside. So oftentimes, like I did with the green, this is from the Gabby collection, I was able to do the leaves all from the same paper. So I had a light green and that teal, and then I just went ahead and layered that. And what you'll see on my projects is I alternated. So I had some of the base layer as this teal, and then some of the base layer as the green. And so it really just gives a different look depending on, you know, which combination that you are using. And so you can kind of play around and explore with that. I also would suggest maybe making a few of these and keeping them stored with your die set. That way you can refer to it, especially when you're trying to pick out colors. If you want to look and see, okay, what part of the die is this center part? Because I want this to be a specific color. That center part is this darkest pink color. So then I can go and find a color for that. So having some completed ones stuck in there with your die set will help you as each time you go to use your set of dies. Now, same thing for this little bunch of florals. That is this one here. I've added some pen detail and stuff to mine, but that's this one here. And so I used, of course, a variety of yellows and golds and things to cut those out. And I just sit down and do like all the pinks at once, all the yellows at once, all the greens at once, and that just happens to work best for me. So let's talk about assembling these, because that can be a little bit tricky. So I am going to leave this turned over so we can see our guide here. I'm going to set one up here that's already assembled. Let's actually start with the leaf, because that's the easiest one, right? Can't mess that one up. So let me... Okay, so I have found the best way is to use either a glue pen or to attach double-sided adhesive to the back of your paper before you roll it through. Scrapbook.com has these rolls of double-sided adhesive. These are great for this, so you can just pull it off. They have different widths. They also have sheets, so depending on how you are most likely to use it, basically you would take this and just stick it to the back of your paper before you run it through your die cutting machine. I'm not going to do the die cutting on camera today just because that's so labor intensive, so check out that die cutting tip Tuesday if you need more help with how to actually do the die cutting process. But again, you could put that double-sided adhesive on the back and then cut through, and it would make these into stickers. Another option is to use a Xyron sticker maker. So after you've cut them out, if you forgot to add adhesive, because let's be real, that's my life. I usually cut and then realize I probably should have stuck adhesive behind there. So you can stick these down in here and turn them into stickers. So if I just go ahead, stick this in, pull it out, and then you're going to rub around it. That picks up any of the excess adhesive. Now, I will say that this can be a little bit of a messy technique, not any more messy than the glue pen, but it can be a little bit messy when you're dealing with intricate pieces, just because sometimes the adhesive kind of sticks out from around the die cut. Also, with these delicate pieces, you have to be very careful that you don't tear them when you pull this top sheet off. So this is all your extra adhesive that just gets thrown away. And then now I can pull this off and it's a giant sticker. But again, just be very careful because it's very delicate. So then you're just going to go in here and you're going to line it up. So find some identifying markers. I'm looking at the end of the stem here. I'm looking to make sure that the base of the light green is lining up with the outside edge of these leaves. And what I mean by that is like this one here, this one goes to the center of the leaf, but this one, the green rests right on the bottom of the teal, if you can see that on the edge. So I'm going to make sure that that's on the edge, and then that goes in the center, and it's all going to stick down. Now, because this is kind of tacky because of the Xyron sticker maker, I would then just brush over this with a powder tool, and this kind of deactivates any of the adhesive that's exposed, and then you can kind of just rub it in your fingers, and that will take that dusty look off. So that is a nice and quick and easy way to turn them into stickers. And then what I like to do as a finishing touch, just to kind of add some more detail, is I go in with a white gel pen, and then just add some really messy, sketchy highlight lines. And this just adds like an extra layer to these that really kind of dresses them up. That green on teal can be, if there's not a lot of contrast between your colors, can be a little muted looking. So this kind of brings some brightness to them, but definitely not a necessary step. So that is probably the easy one to assemble, is this larger leaf. If we go on to this little poke 'em up leaf, the way that I know these to go together are because of my guides. So if I just had a pile of these cut out, I'm going to go and match it. So I'm matching it to this one here, and then I'm matching this piece to that piece there, and then that's how I know that they go together, if that makes sense. So if you kind of just narrow down and look at one at a time and not all of them at once, it's a little bit easier that way. Another way to adhere these, of course, are with a glue pen. This is the Zig two-way glue pen. When the glue is blue, it's a permanent bond. If you let it kind of dry down a little bit until it's clear, then it's a temporary bond. So that's just a heads up for how this glue looks. I just kind of dot it on there, and then I'm going to line up the bottom of my stem here, lining up that stem, making sure that this piece is meant to be smaller than the darker teal piece, so it shouldn't be hanging over any edges, and then just pressing it together. So you can see it is a lot quicker with the Xyron sticker maker because you're not having to hold down that wet glue while it dries. This glue does dry sticky, so if any of the glue kind of seeps out or is exposed, you'll have stickiness just the same, and so you'll just, same thing, use your powder tool to brush over, and that'll take away any stickiness. And then again, just going in and following up with a gel pen. You could be really like particular about where you put your highlights. I just kind of add some messy little squiggles just to add some more detail. So there is that leaf. I think the leaves are pretty basic. Let's move to a flower. So for this flower here, this is going to be this large floral here. So you're going to have 4 pink pieces, a yellow piece, and a darker yellow piece. So we'll save those center pieces for the end. Let's work on these 4 layers first. So I want to find my base layer. That's going to be your solid most one. And when you're looking at the dies, your base layers are the most open. They don't have any pieces on the inside. So this is a base layer, this is a base layer, this is a base, this is a base, if that makes sense. So that, I'm gonna line it up, figure out that that's my base layer for this flower. And then same thing, I just go through and find the pieces, match them up so that I identify that all those flowers go together. And like I had them in my tray, just all kind of stuck together, that might be helpful as well. Okay, so when I do this, I actually do a dry run before I add adhesive. So I'm going to take my second layer, and I want to kind of figure out how it lines up on this base layer. So I look for some identifying markers. There's this little pointy piece here, and there's a pointy piece here. So now I'm going to use that to kind of line up and kind of set it all together. Same thing when I go in with the third piece, but let's go ahead, let's stick this one down. I'm just going to use a glue pen. I don't need to run this big piece through the Xyron sticker maker. This is a pretty easy one. And you'll see most of that base layer gets covered. This is just going to be your darker center. Now, if you didn't think that that center was dark enough, you could always come in and add, some marker details, something to that center to change the color. Again, you can customize your cardstocks with paints, markers, watercolors, things like that. Okay, so this is my third layer. I know that because on my guide here, this is the same shape. And when I'm trying to figure them out, because the size is different, again, I'm looking for identifying markers. So I'm going to look for this big petal here. I'm kind of looking at this open space here, and that's how I know that this is going to be my third piece. So when I go to line it up on here, I'm going to do a dry run. I'm looking at this notch and this big leaf, and that's how I know that these line up just like that. So take it in small sections. Don't look at the entire thing all at once because that can be a little daunting. And you can add as much or as little adhesive as you want. I'm going to add just a little bit because this is just a demo here. Okay. And you want to make sure that everything is flush. This particular die set does not let things hang over the edge. Everything is flush and contained within that base layer. So that's how you know that it's adhered in the right orientation. Okay, so for the last petal layer, again, I'm looking for identifying markers. So there's these little bits that kind of look like crab claws, and then there's this bigger petal piece. So I've got my crab claws, and then I got my larger petal piece. Yes, that is how my brain works when I'm putting these together. I know that these little crab claw ends are going to have a tendency to stick up. So I want to make sure that I get adhesive specifically on those end pieces so that everything lays flat and I don't risk it catching and pulling off. Okay, I didn't do my dry run, so that's my bad. But again, I'm looking for this big petal piece and this little notch. That's kind of how I know where it fits together. And this flower is pretty easy to see. Now, when it comes to the crab claw pieces, because those are thin, you may have to manipulate them so that they're right in the right spot at the top there. But again, it's not perfect. It is a little bit abstract. So if it's, don't fret if you don't have it exactly where it needs to be. Okay, so there is our flower. Now we can start adding in the center pieces. And when I do this, you just have to find what works best for you. You may want to do all your base layers at once and then all your second layers of all your flowers at once rather than one flower at a time. I'm just doing one flower at a time so that we can focus and I can show you the steps. Okay, so I need to find this teeny tiny little yellow piece, and I went ahead and cut all my yellows at the same time. If that's overwhelming for you, you can cut one flower at a time. So I'm looking, there's like a little piece that hangs down, and so it's going to be this one right here. So I need this piece, and then it has a little like half moon, crescent moon shape, and I think that's going to be that piece right there. So again, I had cut all mine out ahead of time. Now I have found it easier to add the glue first and then stick these smaller pieces down, and even more helpful to have one of these pick-me-up tools. This tool has like putty in the end of it. It also has a little pokey end if you need to push things into place, but this tacky putty end allows you to pick up the item and stick it down in the glue. Okay, so my dry run, I'm going to pick this up. I'm looking at these little stick 'em out pieces and how those are oriented on my flower. So I'm going to kind of lay my flower in the same direction that it is on the packaging, and then I'm going to kind of eyeball how this one sticks down. Now the centers do not have to be perfect. Again, it is abstract. So I kind of have a general idea where it goes. I'm going to add a little dot of glue. I'm going to stick my piece down, and I am a little bit turned. Let's try that. Once I get this putty off of it, I'll turn it around and I'll show you what I saw here. Okay, so once this dries, I can pull that putty off. Okay, what I saw was that this little finger of the yellow rests in that crook of this pink layer here, right up against there. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that on camera, but that is something that I could see in the photo. Now for this teeny tiny little piece, I'm just going to stick it down kind of wherever in the center. It does not have to be perfect. I'm going to make sure that I don't have any of that putty residue or it'll be trapped underneath that piece. So I'm just going to add like a little crescent shape of glue. And this paper is double-sided, so you want to make sure that you are on the correct color side. And then stick down that little crescent piece. And so there is our flower. And now what you will see is the difference between the two. So these are essentially the same color cardstocks. These, this layer here and this layer here is a little bit different, but this is the one that has white detail added to it and this one doesn't. And so you can just kind of see the difference. This one's a little more flat looking, looks like just, you know, paper pieced together. I like it to have a little bit more detail, so that's up to you. Okay, so there is our big floral. Let's see, this floral here, this is this top one. Now it only has 3 petal pieces. It does not have the 4 pieces, and you'll see that in these darker colors, and that one doesn't have the darker color. So there's only 3 pieces. So it should be fairly easy to put together. I'm going to position this in the same orientation that it is on the picture. So I'm looking at this little nub here and this little nub over here. And again, I'm going to do a dry run. So I've already identified that this is my second layer. I'm looking at this little nub down here. I'm going to line it up with the nub on the base layer. And it fits just like a puzzle. Again, no overlapping. Everything fits exactly how it should be with nothing overhanging. So you know you've done it right if everything fits flush. So I can add a little bit of adhesive and stick that down. And again, if you wanted to use the Xyron sticker maker, you could run everything through all at once. They have different sizes. They have, I think that's the 2-inch size. This is like the 3-inch size, I believe. And then they have an even bigger one. So if you think that you're going to, you know, get a lot of use out of these dies and something you're going to do a ton, you may want to look into something like that. Okay, so I've gone ahead and identified my third layer. And again, I want to kind of orient it to the same way that it is on the picture, just so that it makes things easier. And then I'm going to do a dry run. So I'm going to lay that. I'm looking at this nub here, and I'm going to make sure that those fit and kind of see if there's anything I need to be worried about when I go to stick it down with the glue. This little crab claw arm, I want to make sure that it's right on the edge of the flower when I stick it down. I know it's kind of hard to see these delicate pieces and my fingers in the way. So again, I want to make sure that I have glue on those looser little end pieces so that they don't pop up. I'm going to line up my nub with my little nub. Make sure that my crab claw is all the way to the edge. I'm just holding it for a second for that glue to set. And there's the base of our flower. And you'll see it really does not look like much until we start adding the center pieces. So I need another big yellow piece. And again, I'm looking at, there's like a little tail that hangs out. This is not the piece. This has, let's see if I can hold this. So it has this, this little bit right here is what I'm looking at to identify this as the center of this flower. So again, I'm going to stick it to the same orientation that it is on here. I'm going to do a dry run. Now this one kind of nestles down and fits like a puzzle. Let me show you before I glue it together. So it's going to nestle in with this little dip right here. There's like a little notch right here that it fits. There's a little ripple right here that it fits. So it all just kind of fits down in there like a puzzle piece. So since I know that it fits down in there, I'm just going to add a little drop of glue right to the center. I want to make sure that I've got it turned the right way before I pick it up. And then I'm going to drop that down and totally not pay attention to my directions. All right, so there is the center piece. Double checking to make sure that it looks right. Yep, that looks right. Okay, now my last darkest piece is this little U-shaped piece. And I did cut that out of the darkest piece of cardstock that I had. And that's gonna be this little U-shaped piece here. Again, this one does not have to be perfect, so I'm just gonna put a little U-shape dab of glue. And I found it really doesn't make a difference where you stick this in the center. It's gonna work. So here is a look. I don't have a finished one of that floral with the white on it, but there is a finished look at that smaller flower. So again, it's just building up a piece at a time. Okay, so let's do this one because it's a little bit more complicated because it has the 3 main layers, and then that lightest layer is actually these 2 tiny little comma shapes. And so those are right here in the die set. So I actually stuck them in the center of that so I would know it would all go together. But again, just looking at the picture tells you exactly what shapes that you need to line up. So again, we're gonna lay this one out in the same orientation as it is on here. We're gonna do a dry run. I'm looking at this little nub right here and kind of the bottom of the flower. And I know that that's gonna line up just like that. So let me go ahead and start assembling and we'll get to that harder part there. Okay, now this one doesn't fit flush on the bottom. So I wanna show you why it's so important to do a dry run of placing this down to make sure you know where it goes. So I'm looking at this little nub right here. I'm looking that all of this right here actually fits within that top area. So when I go to lay it down, there's gonna be a little bit of a gap at the bottom there. So what I can see is right up in here, this is gonna line up. And then this is gonna line up towards the top there. So really you're lining up more with the top than you are with the bottom. So that, and it leaves a little bit of a gap if you can see that there. So that's why it's important to do it without adhesive first. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some adhesive and then stick that down. Okay, so our last pieces are gonna be these teeny tiny little light pink pieces, and they are gonna kind of form this folded over flower. So again, you wanna do a dry run. So I'm kind of looking at the shape. This one kind of looks like, I don't know, one of those big knives or a wave. And so that is gonna go right along this edge here. So I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it, but there's this little edge right here, a little curvature right here, and this is gonna nestle right along that curve, and it's gonna kind of sit up against this lighter pink area, just like that. So I know that that's where it's gonna go. So I'm gonna lift this up. I'm gonna add a little line of glue. Just on these smaller pieces, it's easier to do it that way. The nice thing about the pick-me-up tool is it's got this pokey, so I can kind of manipulate that piece into place if I need to. Okay, so this piece is going to be that curled over edge of your flower. And this piece actually lines up on this color along this line right here. So, and then it kind of nestles just like that, just along that straight lined edge. Okay, so I know where it's gonna go. I'm gonna pick this up. I'm gonna add a little bit of glue. This is one of those projects that it's gonna be, once you get your hands on it and give it a go, the more you do it, the easier it'll be. And I'll say it's easier to sit down and do a ton of them all at once than one at a time. Because even just in the time, a couple days since I made these other ones, I've forgotten where things go. But when you're on a roll and you're doing, 20 of them, you get in a routine, you know where stuff goes. You don't have to do that dry run. You can just stick stuff down. So, and this one doesn't have any yellow center pieces. So that is it for that. Okay, so this one's pretty self-explanatory as well. It does have a little edge piece, but for the sake of time, let's go ahead and take a look at the yellow cluster piece. So this one comes with that's this set right here. You got this little trio base. This is your middle layer, and then this is your topmost layer. So it's 3 pieces for that little floral cluster, and that's gonna look like this. This one's pretty forgiving. So again, I'm gonna line things up kind of in the same orientation as the paper. And then I've got this die cuts it in 2 separate pieces. So I've got 1 piece for that top flower, and then this is for this double flower situation down here. Okay, so this one, we're gonna go ahead and try to match up with the orientation of the picture. It can be a little bit tricky. And I'm gonna do a dry run. And again, I'm trying to find some identifying markers. So you may need to just kind of play with it and rotate it until things nestle into place. Again, you don't want anything hanging over the edges. So there is what I'm seeing here. There's this little notch right here, and there's a little notch right here. That's what I'm going to line up, and that's going to fit just like that. So again, easier to just pick this up, add some glue in the middle. I'm going to line up my little notches, and just like that, that side is done. Okay, so dry run for this one. I'm looking at this little tail in the picture to get the orientation. And then this is going to line up. So again, I'm looking for these little notches, and that's what I'm lining up with the notches on the base layer, just like that. And you'll see it does not perfectly fit over that hole. That's not what it's meant to do. That actually, in fact, that hole gets totally covered by the darker pieces. So I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to add glue. This is not the way to do it. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit of glue on there and hope that I can re-find all my notches. Okay, and there isn't a whole lot of contrast between those two colors. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. And I have some residue from the tool, but don't worry, it just rubs right off. I just don't rub it until the glue is dry. Okay, now these three center pieces are really just going to go in the center of the flowers. They are not going to go anywhere fancy. The only fancy one is this flower that kind of looks like it's pointed down. So it's like this little sliver shape. You want to make sure that that's pointed in the same direction so that the flower takes shape. So let's start with that one. I'm going to pick it up. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of glue, kind of looking at the photo. I'm going to add a little bit of glue right in the center of where that flower would be, and then stick down that piece. And just like that, you can see it kind of curves like an upside down U shape. That's how that one's going to go. And then for these other pieces, we have this one is going to go kind of right in here around. Actually, that hole does not get covered. I lied. So this is going to kind of nestle around that hole. And I'll show you that. So there's like a little notch in that darker piece that fits around the hole in the die cut. And that's just kind of distinguishing between the three flowers by having that hole there. This one is pretty symmetrical in the shape, so I'm not worried about where I stick the center down. So you may want a little bit more contrast between your yellows. You'll see that the two base layer yellows are pretty similar, and then this color was my darkest piece. So you may want a little bit more contrast between those two to see more of that. But you can see I just went in with a white gel pen on the lightest layer, the base layer, and just added a little bit of detail, and that just kind of brought in some more detail. And then I added some black pen to the centers to just kind of make it dressed up a little bit. My glue is not dry. There we go. Okay. Let's do this final flower while we're here, just because it does have some extra little pieces, and I missed a piece right here. So this little hook piece actually goes on this flower, and it's pretty easy to see where it's missing. So here's this little, it kind of looks like a duck right here. So this piece cuts out all by itself, and that is going to go just like that. It nestles right in there. So I'm going to add a little bit of glue. So this is a tricky thing with these, is there are a lot of little pieces. If you're somebody that has arthritis or has difficulty with your hands, this is definitely not the set for you. It can be a little bit of, tedious work. Okay, last flower. So we are going to dry run it. Super easy. Everything kind of lines up. So we'll add a little bit of glue. I'm not going to add too much on there just for the sake of the video. I'm going to line that up. Maybe we'll add a little bit there. Okay, this piece, again, we're going to dry run. So I'm looking at this big area right here. So it's pretty easy to line up. Again, it's not overlapping. You do want to be cautious of this little piece right there. So now that I know where it goes, I can add my glue, making sure I add glue right to the end of that piece so that it stays where it needs to. You can see this gets messy. You get glue kind of everywhere. I had glue all over my desk. But it's so worth it, and it's a great way to use up those colored cardstocks. Add that layer. And then our pink layer is 2 pieces, or our lightest pink layer. So there's that piece there, and then there's this little tiny piece. So I want to check and see where, and actually, there should be one more. Yep, there it is. So there's 3 pieces for this topmost layer. So we're going to do this bigger piece first. Again, I'm working on this flower right here. So I can kind of just eyeball this leaf here, or that petal kind of lines up with that petal there. And that's where it goes, lining up right on the edge. Looking at the picture, the lightest pink area, and it lines up on the edge just like that. So I'm going to flip it over, add some adhesive. Okay. And then we've got this larger, fatter piece goes right here. That's going to kind of go right in this area. So I'm going to kind of just line it up and see where it fits. And it should be, so it's going to align with this edge of this 3rd pink layer right there. It's going to line up just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just add my glue right to that. I would be a lot more careful if I was taking my time. And I'm going to just use my pick-me-up tool to hold that in place. Okay, and then our last piece is very hard to see. It's actually right here. That's this little piece right here. It's going to go right on this edge of the petal, which is right, I believe it's right in here, if I remember correctly. Right along this bottom edge. I'm going to pick this up. And again, I apologize. It's going to be really tough to keep my fingers out of this for the sake of the video and put it together. But I hope this gives you just a few tips and some general ideas for how to assemble these flowers so that when you go to do it, it won't be as difficult. Okay, and then you got that last leaf. So there's a look at how to assemble all of those flower pieces from the Garden Pick 3D die set from Altenew. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave those down below, and check out the description box for links to everything that I talked about and used today. All of those will be down there for you. Give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed, and until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.